Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And I'm honored today to have Dotty Posto with us. She is the founder of In Plain Sight, and she's an executive coach. So, Dotty, welcome. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Excellent. So my background is I started out in business and I was in training. I was a business analyst. I was a project manager. And as a project manager, I often got does not play well with others on my report card, as my husband and I used to playfully call it. And it wasn't until I was introduced to change management during that one of my stints as a project manager. And then I became the manager of change management at Harley Davidson, and later the manager of organizational development. And I learned a lot about aligning our gifts and talents to the work that we do. And so what I learned was that a lot of the gifts and talents I had were not related to project management. And so the project management I got very skilled at, and yet it took so much energy that I was not always the best, I didn't always give my best, or I didn't, others didn't get the best of me. They got controlling and aggressive and condescending and all these other, things that I would get.
Well, wow, that's so you had some self-awareness along the way of you were in a role, you came to some self-awareness that that there were some things that weren't working, or that weren't sort of happening the way you wanted them to, or the way the others wanted them to, maybe. So that sort of brings you along. So you're at Harley Davidson. That's pretty cool. And I'm probably reaching that age in life where I probably want one of those in the next couple of years. I'm not as young as I used to be. Like, sport bikes and stuff are not as interesting anymore. So, but that's really awesome that you came to that self-awareness. So, like,
can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
That self-awareness came, which is why I do what I do. Part of why I do what I do is I requested a coach the first time I was sent to training for my does not play well with others. And then I knew that whatever I learned wasn't going to stick unless I had some regular interaction with someone who was helping me. And so I hired a coach. I hired like my first 3 coaches, and then I didn't have a coach for a while, and I got assigned a coach because another time I got the does not play well with others. Again, I was in a program management type role. And that's where I really started to build an even deeper self-awareness. So that self-awareness is generally very challenging to come about on your own. It often requires that outside perspective to help you see what you can't see, which is why I call my business In Plain Sight, because I help people see what is in plain sight for others, but maybe not for yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah. Wow. So that self-discovery led you down this path of wanting to become a coach yourself to help others who might be struggling with similar types of challenges. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yes. And to be able to work with them and their team to really help create an environment that fosters trust, healthy debate, accountability.
Yeah. Excellent. So who is your who is your typical client? Who are the types of folks that you feel you create the most value for? And maybe people or teams, as you referred to. Who are your typical clients or target clients that you're looking to support and help? What is it about them that might make them a great client for you?
So usually they're small to mid-sized businesses, or they're a department within a much larger business. So I actually worked with a division, not the entire division, but with a company within GE where I worked with, and what they were challenged with is people were all in agreement in the room, and yet outside the room they were not. They, and so they weren't meeting their objectives. They were not getting to their metrics. And even in the room, even though some people were agreeing, there was a toxic rock star who was, just this overly aggressive, fist pounding on the table, and then someone else who had their, arms crossed and, shut down often in the meetings. And then the other ones who were just like, yeah. And then outside the room, they're like, oh, not happening.
Yeah. So working with a team like that, because I could envision a team like that where you've got a person who's commanding the attention, commanding the room. You've got a person who, like you said, the arms crossed. I had a situation like that about 4 years ago. I was in a facilitating a training for a client, and there was one person that I noticed he wouldn't even sit down. He actually stood along the wall with his arms crossed for most of the time. And I had to sort of separately during a break go in and ask him some questions and try to draw him in. But so you've got these overly commanding personalities. You got people who have checked out and have decided they're no longer part of the team. You've got all these different dynamics going on. So what's your process, or how do you sort of go through that and start bringing awareness and getting people to collaborate together better?
So there's two ways that I tend to work with an organization. Either I'll work just with the leader and do like 6 months of 6 months to a year of coaching, because it takes time to build that awareness and to build that capacity. And really that's the kind of the first step, is building some awareness of really the thoughts that they're having. Because oftentimes when these leaders are sent to training, that training looks at and really tries to focus on their actions and shifting their actions. And if all we do is try to change the actions of a leader, it's not going to stick. It's not going to hold. Because what we do, our actions, what we do or don't do, is all because of how we feel or how we think we want to feel, or how we're going to feel. So everything we do is based on how we feel, and how we feel is based on how we think. How we feel is not based on what other people are doing outside of us. So if that guy's in the room pounding his fist on the table, it's my thought about that, not that actual situation. Because some people are like, bring it, buddy, bring it. Let's have a debate. Let's discuss this. And other people are very offended and very upset by those kinds of things.
Interesting. No, and that's really interesting the way you put that. The theme that I'm talking about all the time now, and the theme of optics in action. So optics has two definitions in the dictionary. One of them is a technical definition. It's about the study of light. The second one is about perceptions and perceptions of situations and behaviors. And I think it fits so well as I talk with you, and as I'm reflecting on some of the things that you just said, that sometimes these leaders might get taught the technical things that they should do, right? The technical actions they should take or not take, and things like that. But it's often the perceptions about situations that also play a really significant role in how that leader behaves, and how their team behaves, and how their team reacts, and things like that. So it's a fascinating perspective that you shared about that.
And it's interesting that you say that, because perception is essentially a thought. And that thought is essentially, it's based on, a lot of times that thought is based on a habit, a habitual filter that we learned years and years and years ago. Someone I know, not my husband, but someone I know who works with my husband has a filter of, if anybody ever questions their knowledge, they get so like, do you think I'm stupid? They really get up in arms, because there was, something about this person's past that, where being questioned about whether they know what they're doing or not is really a trigger for them. And they get very angry and upset and loud and defensive. And, so a lot of these habits, a lot of these reactions are habits that we developed a long time ago. And the whole idea is to be able to separate and be able to observe our thoughts, which most of us were never trained to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. So how do you bring that self-awareness? How do you help when you're coaching an individual who may be commanding too much, or who may be sort of not having emotional intelligence, maybe of what's going on around them? How do you help them start to bring self-awareness? What does that look like?
So there's a few different things that we can do. The first thing that is pretty obvious to some people, and maybe to me, because this is my background with organizational development, is to do a 360, which is an assessment where this leader is given a review. You ask very specific questions of their leader, of their peers, and then of the people that report to them. And being able to give them some perspective of, that this is how other people are perceiving your actions, and being able to help them understand that that's their perception, yes, and that it isn't, I can't cause people to feel anything, and my actions have impact. And so getting to that awareness of my actions have impact, getting to that awareness, and then getting to the awareness, building that next step of my thoughts are driving how I feel, and how I feel is driving what I do. And so for some people, they don't even know what they're thinking, and they don't know what they're feeling. And so those are two pieces that we work on, and that's what takes time. And some of that we might do thought downloads every day. What am I thinking? What am I actually thinking? Or in a meeting, if I'm starting to feel ire, like I'm starting to get, what am I thinking? How am I feeling? Starting to build a habit of awareness of what's going on here, and then what's going on in our body. Because a feeling is just a sensation, a physical representation in our body. It's a vibration in our body.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So how do people become aware that they could benefit from your services? So what I'm thinking is that leader, if they're not self-aware, right? If they're the owner of a small company, they may not be self-aware, and they may not even know that you could help them. Or a leader, or an executive, or a VP of a large corporation may not have that self-awareness, right? They've been incredibly successful to get where they were. The entrepreneur has been incredibly successful to get where they are. And so how do you flip that switch, or start to bring awareness that they might need the services that you offer?
That's a great question. I usually try to work, if the CEO isn't the toxic rock star, then I try to work at that CEO or someone in that senior leadership level, who is seeing that there is maybe not the productivity, maybe not the growth, maybe they're getting higher turnover, maybe metrics aren't quite being met. Usually if you have a toxic rock star, things are happening, but there is a lot of noise in the background. And I agree. So many executives are turning a blind eye to it. They're denying that it's going on. And, in some cases I can work with HR and try to see where might this be happening. And in the really small organizations, it's tougher because they might not have HR, they might not have formal processes for reviews. But in the mid-sized companies, they're starting to get that formal structure, that formal support in, and then usually during a review, someone, if they're able to do a 360 or able to do upward feedback in a performance review, something is coming out that there's, there's something coming out that says there's something going on, that this leader's behavior isn't, appropriate. And when you've got people performing, there's always the risk. People always are, the senior leadership is weighing the risk of this person's producing, and what's the risk benefit, what's the risk benefit, risk reward of, if I try to change their behavior, am I going to still get the production from this person while raising the production of everyone else? The problem is that even if you have this rock star, everyone else in the organization, the fear, they're in a fight, flight, or freeze. That level of fear is inhibiting their creativity, inhibiting innovation, inhibiting any kind of creative problem solving.
Yep. Very good. Yeah. So interesting. That's you've given us a lot to think about, Dotty. So if people are interested, as they've gotten sort of a flavor of who you are and what you do, if they're interested in contacting you, getting in touch with you, what's the best way for people to reach out to In Plain Sight, or to yourself, to learn more?
Probably just email me, which is Dotty, Dotty, at inplainsightinc.com, and plain is PLAIN, and sight is SIGHT.
All right, awesome. So we'll get that. We'll try to make sure we've got that in the header or in the footer of the podcast. So thank you again, Dotty, for being on the podcast, Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And I can see the vision that you have and the clarity that you have gained from self-experience and self-awareness and helping others. So thank you again for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It was great.